Things reached a fever pitch when, one morning, the Greens awoke to find the very same garage had been flooded. Officers kept watch from dusk till dawn, only to be terrified by smashing windows, loud bangs, and the house shaking so hard that everyone did some detective work. It turns out Rose's late husband had been the head elephant trainer for the circus, and that flattened barn on the property, well, it seems like it had been made with wood salvaged from none other than the old elephant barn where he had worked. And with this information in hand, the police chief believed that he had solved the case. Clearly, the family was being tormented by the ghost of an angry elephant, come to seek vengeance on the widow of the man who had mistreated it. It's a good story, sure.
An elephant ghost?
I have to admit that all of these details appear to originate from a single article in a December 1953 issue of Fate magazine. And in fact, the police chief cited in the story, a guy named August Marlowe,
never heard of
doesn't even seem to have
elephant ghost.
So take the whole story with an elephant-sized grain of salt. But while the story is likely fiction, that hasn't kept it from spreading. Not to mention the fact that some residents still claim to hear the trumpeting of elephants near the former site of Ringlingville to this day. And of course, the phantom elephant isn't the only ghost in Baraboo. Take, for example, the very haunted Al Ringling Theater. Named for Albert, not Alfred, if you're keeping track. Al had built the place himself, or rather paid exorbitantly to have it built as a gift to the city where he got his start. The theater is lavish, too, with 874 seats, including 17 box seats. An iron and glass canopy hangs over the entrance with a triumphal arch and hand-painted murals all across the ceiling.
My heart!
But here's the thing. The theater's beloved founder barely got to enjoy his creation. He died, you see, on New Year's Day of 1916, just 6 weeks after opening night. But hey, well, Al never for it. In death.
My heart just dropped. I almost missed that jump. Oh, holy crap.
In one particular spot, box 17. As the story goes, a set designer at the theater brought his 3-year-old daughter to work one day. The young girl began smiling and waving up to box 17. She told her father that she was waving at a man. But when the designer looked up, the box was empty. Later that same day, as the little girl and her father left the theater, a photo in the lobby caught the child's eye. Excitedly, she pointed and told her father that that was the man she'd been waving to. And I think you already know what comes next. It was a photograph of Al Ringling. But he's not the only ghost in that theater. Far from it. There's a little girl in a poofy dress, a little boy in suspenders, a woman in white searching silently for her lost baby. A baby, according to the tales, who fell to its death from the theater balcony years before, and can still be heard crying through the audio equipment. And then there's the violent Shadow Man.
Hold up, how did the baby just get up on the... How did the baby just jump off the railing? Did the mother or father just throw the baby off the balcony? What?
And believe it or not, all of these accounts are just...
Or was the baby just climbed over the railing?
One story claims that a group of boys went adventuring in the rooms below the theater.
Okay, I'm confused about that.
And died there. Their ghosts are still scratching on the walls, trying to get out to this very day. Is there any historical evidence to back this story up? No. No missing boys are on record. But that doesn't keep the whispers from spreading. Oh, and one last theater ghost. But this one isn't a person. Not a whole one, anyway. Allegedly, a workman unloading steel for construction back in 1915 accidentally severed his own finger. But rather than go quietly, this finger, and I quote, took on a life of its own, flicking the lights on and off, and even poking theater goers. And even today, when musicians in the orchestra get their notes wrong, they often blame it on the ghostly finger, reaching out from beyond the grave to tap the wrong note.
Huh? Okay, I don't get that. What? A finger? A finger ghost. What?
Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey were, without a doubt, the biggest.
How's that a thing?
But they were far from the only one. By the 19-teens, there were around 100 American circuses traveling the country. And while many did still travel by wagon, nearly 1/3 of those traveled, like the Ringling Brothers, by rail. The American Railroad was heavy with coal and lumber, for sure, but it also rattled with bright, glimmering circus trains, all sharing the same routes. Unfortunately, some of those trains were...
I missed my chance to take
tragedy. In 1918, a show called Hagenbeck Wallace was America's
like I died. I didn't like. I should really be carrying M2 and L9.
60 acrobats, 60 riders, 50
just in case
100 dancers. Not to mention lions, tigers, zebras, elephants, camels,
just in case if it
and even
comes
a hippopotamus.
Around.
And understandably, this required a heck of a long train, or rather 2 separate trains of 28 cars each. By all accounts, June 22nd of 1922 was a warm night. The Hagenbeck Wallace Circus was heading from Michigan City, Indiana to Hammond, Indiana, a 45-mile journey. For the first train, that trip was a breeze, and they arrived just fine. The second train, though, had to stop around 4 a.m. to deal with some light mechanical issues. And so they pulled onto a side track for repairs, leaving 5 cars on the main track. 5 cars, mind you, that contained many of the circus performers asleep in their bunks. Little did they know, some of them would never wake up again. Disaster was already speeding toward them. You see, in an empty passenger train a ways up the track, the engineer had fallen asleep at the controls. Unmanned, the train rocketed forward, blowing past signals warning of the stopped cars ahead, and charging right for Hagenbeck Wallace.
Oh.
It was the circus's brakeman, Oscar Tim, who saw it first. He ran toward the oncoming train, waving his lantern and even throwing things at the window to get the engineer's attention. But it did no good. Oscar was forced to watch in horror as the passenger train flew by and smashed into the 5 cars on the main track.
Oh.
The sound was so loud that those who lived near the crash site first thought that a steel mill had exploded. Sparks flew, the earth shook, and what followed was nothing short.
Oh, why am I laughing about it?
The train from hell split the sleeper cars right down the middle. Performers were trapped between broken bones.
Why am I laughing about it?
The lumber even crushed beneath the wheels. Others tangled into warped piles of bedding.
Well, let's go take Bradley.
And an acrobat named Mary Enos had escaped the wreckage, only to dive back in to dig Mary's unconscious husband Eugene from the pile of debris. They in history. And yet, despite that, only 3 days later, the Hagenbeck Wallace Circus performed in Beloit, Wisconsin as scheduled. This was a job, after all, and the cast and crew had mouths to feed and debts to pay. They couldn't afford to skip shows.
Oh, there's mine.
All but one of their 25 acts could not stop to mourn and put on black. We had to go on, no matter how we did feel inside. The day after this Beloit show, on June 26th of 1918, 56 victims of the train crash were buried in a cemetery plot known as Showman's Rest. It's a plot in the Woodlawn Cemetery in Forest Park, Illinois, reserved for circus performers and carnival workers. The founders of the plot had a simple goal in mind, for no showman to ever be buried in a pauper's grave. And for the victims of the Illinois circus wreck, that would be true. They were the first burials in the newly purchased plot. 1,500 mourners turned out to the mass funeral, and the coffins were laid to rest with reverence in a huge shared grave. These coffins contained some of the most celebrated circus artists of their time, and yet only 13 of those 56 bodies had been identified. Many of the dead were simply too badly burned to be recognized. Others, due to the transient lifestyle of that line of work, have never been known beyond a nickname to begin with. Many stones bear words like unknown male or unknown female. Others, just simple monikers like Baldy or Smiley. Some list an occupation alone. So many names and lives, all lost to history. And yet perhaps the victims aren't as far gone as they seem. With such a legacy of tragedy, it's no wonder that many believe Showman's Rest is haunted. Visitors there claim to have heard the disembodied laughter of clowns on the wind, echoing throughout the cemetery. And trust me, I hate that idea just as much as you do. Others have heard circus music in the air. Ghost hunting groups claim that the batteries of their electronics have mysteriously drained in the area, or that the equipment
that's known for ghosts.
Or jammed.
Some drain batteries quickly.
Smoke, as if the train that took so many lives is still relentlessly burning.
There's fucking chickens in my compound.
Of Showman's Rest aren't done performing just yet, even in death. The show, after all, must go on.
Damn it. No, my pumpkins! I shouldn't be taking all my high velocity, all my HV rockets.
There's something about that tension between its dreamy, childlike magic and its seedy underbelly that makes it endlessly fascinating. A place, much like folklore, where fear and wonder intersect. From the Ringling Brothers' mythic rise to Hagenbeck Wallace's tragic crash, the circus has birthed plenty of its own folklore. And these days, with the golden age of the circus train long behind us, even the art form itself is a bit of a ghost. So really, can you blame the nameless souls at Showman's Rest for calling out, practically begging to be remembered? But here's the thing. The most often reported haunting at Showman's Rest, well, it isn't actually human at all. Instead, countless visitors have reported hearing the spectral midnight trumpeting of elephants. A brief disclaimer for all of you animal lovers, just to ease your mind. All of the animals traveling with the Hagenbeck Wallace Circus were on the first train, safely away from the crash. So no elephants are actually buried at Showman's Rest. But that said, the plot does have a pretty special set of guardians. 5 elephant statues, their trunks lowered in mourning. One explanation for the strange animal sounds is that people are hearing nothing more than real elephants trumpeting in the nearby Brookfield Zoo, a little over a mile away. A logical solution to a haunting mystery, except for one small problem. The Brookfield Zoo doesn't have a single elephant.
Wait, what? You know what, I'll just go to that. I'll go.
Clearly the circus is a place
of magic,
and not always of the innocent kind. The darkness hidden beneath the big top has a way of leaking out into the rest of the world, as ghosts or something else. But sometimes it really all is just an act. Because as one last story will help you see, some circus ghosts are nothing more than illusion. Stick around through this brief sponsor break to hear all about it. This episode of Lore is sponsored by BetterHelp. One of the most common misconceptions about relationships is that they have to be easy to be
BetterHelp!
But sometimes the best ones happen when both people put in the work to make them great.
Where are you playing,
And
Killa?
therapy can be a place to work through the challenges you face
Where are you playing?
in all of your relationships, whether with friends, work, your significant other, or anyone. I know firsthand how helpful it can be to learn.
Oh, that game! I played that game. I didn't like it.
It empowers me to be the best version of myself because
you gotta buy chapter 2.
Major trauma. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Become your own soulmate, whether you're looking for one or not. Visit BetterHelp.com/lore today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lore. This episode was also sponsored by HelloFresh. With HelloFresh, you get farm-fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and seasonal recipes delivered right to your doorstep. Skip trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. That's why it's America's #1 meal kit. It's a new year. Whether your resolution is to save money, eat better, or stress less, HelloFresh is here to help you do all three. Say hello to your most delicious year yet with fresh ingredients and chef-crafted recipes at a price you'll like delivered right to your door. Make saving time your breezy
solution. I need the bullets.
Convenient recipes delivered right to you. Just choose your meals and select your delivery date. HelloFresh handles the meal planning and shopping, so all you have to do is open your weekly box of pre-portioned ingredients.
Oh, let's go take Bradley.
Recipes to get cooking. I love the meals from HelloFresh, and this week I'm excited to dig into barbecue cheddar pork burgers with chipotle aioli and potato wedges.
If you ever get rust and you want to take Bradley, Bradley takes 7 HV rockets, high velocity rockets. It only takes 7.
Lore free for free breakfast for life. One breakfast item.
If you don't miss, I recommend take more than 7. Because if you do miss like a whole bunch of rockets, you'll still have a whole bunch of rockets.
#1 meal kit. This episode of Lore is made possible by June's Journey. Everyone loves a good family mystery, especially one with as many twists and turns as...
But I just hate how fucking launch site. Bradley is located at launch site. It's a big monument too, so But you also need clothes that withstands rads, like a whole bunch of clothes, like.
Honestly, I've always wanted.
Or you could just use a hazmat.
Food, but I have the opposite of a green thumb, whatever color that might be. Lucky for me, though, there just might be a place where gardening is easier than it is in my backyard, on the moon. According to a November article from IFL Science, researchers from the Chinese National Space Administration recently sent a craft to the moon packed with soil, water, and 4 different types of seeds. Their goal was to study the possibility of lunar farming.
Or is it because I'm deep in the snow?
Growth would be affected by the moon's gravity, which is only about 1/6 of what we have here on Earth. Once the lunar garden was up and running, the researchers set an identical one up on our planet. They keep these terrestrial plants under tight, controlled conditions, mirroring the temperature and light of the moon, so the only variable would be the difference in gravity. Now, lunar conditions are far from perfect. Day and night are different there, each lasting for weeks. So, at first, the moon was bright and sunny around the clock, and then something shocking happened.
Oh no.
Cotton seeds in the lunar garden
okay, Bradley's not stuck.
faster than the ones on Earth. But then
it's
night,
okay.
And it stayed dark.
I'm gonna leave my horse right there.
Days straight. Temperatures
dropped. Get out the door!
61 degrees Fahrenheit. Scientists plunged the terrestrial garden into cold and darkness to match, and when they could finally turn the lights back on, they found that all of their earthly seedlings were shriveled and brown. However, when they checked in on the lunar garden, they saw that the cotton seedlings were still alive. It seemed they had developed a resistance to the long, cold night, possibly as a result of the moon's lower gravity.
Get off the door!
It's ongoing, but based on these results, lunar farming isn't just possible, it might actually have some distinct advantages. Weird, right? Speaking of other worlds, did you know that more humans have been to the moon than to the bottom of the ocean? The sea can be as alien to us as another planet, and some very weird creatures swim in its depths, like blobfish, goblin sharks, and vampires. Well, sort of. There's a type of fish called a lamprey. It looks similar to an eel, except its mouth is a big suction cup lined with dozens of razor-sharp teeth.
Is that the thing that lures prey with like an antenna or something?
Feet. And like a vampire, they latch onto their prey and feed on its blood.
Wait, what?
The modern-day lamprey is a creature that you're better off avoiding. But the prehistoric version...
Bro, Bradley's right there! He's outside! What?
Smithsonian Magazine, paleontologists in China recently discovered 2 lamprey fossils that are estimated to be 160 million. They're some of the oldest and most complete specimens ever found. Just take it from paleobiologist Tetsuto Miyashita, who said, and I quote, "There have been no other lamprey fossils from the dinosaur age that preserve their terrorizing oral apparatus quite so clearly." And these things, my friends, are terrifying, even more so than their vampire descendants. It turns out prehistoric lampreys didn't just suck blood. One of the fossils was found to have bone fragments in the stomach, leading experts to believe that they used their mouths to gouge out chunks of the victim's flesh. They were, as National Geographic puts it, like living ice cream scoops. Now that's an image that I don't think I'll ever be able to get out of my mind. But don't let this weird story stop you from booking your next beach vacation. The flesh-eating version of the lamprey is long extinct. And lucky for us, the modern-day vampire fish doesn't have a taste for humans. In other odd animal news, an Italian town near Rome recently had an
well, we don't know that.
visitor. Ladispoli is a seaside city that's home to about 40,000 people. In November, CNN shared a video that one local took, likely from the window of their second-story apartment building. And it shows a view of the residential street below, just as a full-grown male lion prowls across the sidewalk. Now, this wasn't any ordinary lion. His name was Kimba, and he was 8 years old.
Relax! Relax! Relax!
Everyone knew his name. 5 hours earlier, local police had received a call from a traveling circus that was visiting town. Circus staff said someone had cut the lock on their lion's cage. The animal was gone. The police quickly notified the mayor, who put the whole city on alert, telling people to stay indoors. Meanwhile, city officials worked to capture Kimba. They tracked him down.
I have to wait until Chinook leaves.
Once he fell asleep, they circus. He woke up a few hours later, scared and cold, but unhurt. It's still not clear who cut the lock on Kimba's cage. Maybe it was some kids who took a joke way too far. Or perhaps it was animal rights activists protesting the use of wild animals as entertainment. Either way, the mayor of Ladispoli put out the following statement, and I quote, "I hope that this episode will stir some consciences, and that we can finally put an end to the exploitation of animals in circuses." And I have to say, I agree. The Big Top is a weird and wonderful place, but only so long as everyone inside is being taken care of.
Chinook, please leave!
Of course, 2023 isn't the only year with a bit of weird in it. Here are some oddities from this month in history. If you're a sports fan, you probably indulge in a little superstition from time to time. You know, a lucky jersey, a special chant, the firm belief that if you leave to use the bathroom, your team will fall behind. But of all these sports superstitions, there's one that outdoes the rest. And it all started 104 years ago.
Chinook, leave!
And it's called The Curse of the Bambino. We need to start with a quick crash course in baseball history. In
Chinook, leave! Please!
Out of 15 Major League World Series,
I think it's
they had
leaving.
won 5, which was the most of any team.
If it's leaving,
As for what made them
I'm
so
good
good,
to go.
that's easy. They had a guy named Babe Ruth. Even
You leaving?
if know
Okay,
nothing
it's
about
leaving.
baseball,
Thank God.
I'm sure you know that name, which should give you an idea of just how amazing he was. Babe led his team to World Series wins in 1915, 1916, and 1918. He was valuable, and his salary reflected it.
Fuck you, Chinook.
Unfortunately, the owner of the Boston Red Sox looked at Babe Ruth, and all he saw was a giant bill that he had to pay. Babe was a huge investment, but in 1919, he didn't pay off. That year, the Red Sox placed 6th in the league, yet the star player marched right up to the owner and asked for his salary to be doubled. The owner said no in what might have been the harshest way possible. He sold Babe Ruth to the New York Yankees. Now granted, Babe fetched a high price, enough that the Red Sox could hire 3 other players to replace him. But the decision to get rid of him was, in a word, unwise. Some people believe it left the team cursed, even after Babe Ruth retired. You see, following the December 1919 sale, the Red Sox entered a seemingly never-ending era of defeat. Once the best team in the Major League, they wouldn't win another World Series for 85 years. Meanwhile, the Yankees catapulted to the top, reaching the World Series 40 times and winning 27 titles. This became known as the Curse of the Bambino. Bambino is the Italian word for baby or babe, as in Babe Ruth, the man who seemed to mark the Red Sox with terrible luck and give the Yankees the best record in the league. Today, some Boston fans believe that curse was broken in 2004, when the team finally won the World Series again. But still, even with that, the Red Sox have a whole lot of catching up to do. Our next historical tale takes us to Surrey, England, in December of 1912. It was 111 years ago this month that Charles Dawson and Arthur Woodward published their newest scientific findings. They had found the so-called missing link between ape and man. Charles Dawson was an amateur archaeologist, so this extraordinary claim might have not meant much coming from him. But Arthur Woodward was the curator of the British Museum's paleontology department. His name gave the publication some serious weight. According to the article, Dawson had spent the last 3 years digging in the Piltdown grave in Sussex. The rocks there were from the Pleistocene, which is a geological era lasting from about 2.5 million to 11,000 years
only
ago.
3 crates.
He was hoping to find some ancient artifacts, so he was ecstatic when he uncovered hypothesized that these bones belonged to a single individual. So they took the skull fragments, the jawbone, and the teeth, and fashioned them all into one head. The resulting face looked part human, part ape, leading them to believe that they had discovered the evolutionary link between modern Homo sapiens and our ancient ancestors, and it became known as the Piltdown Man. Dawson and Woodward announced their findings in December of 1912.
It's the morning of June the 20th.
Really? It's just completely... What
man,
do you mean? Please, just play Lord, not fucking short story of...
Ew, gotta get rid of this old Backstreet Boys t-shirt.
Yeah, or the strange tales we whisper in the dark.
Downy Rinse and Refresh removes more odor in one wash than the leading value detergent in 3 washes.
Explore the strange tales we whisper in the dark, even if they can't always be proven by the history books.
Oh, okay.
So if you're ready,
unlocked.
Let's begin.
Like on fire. L9.
There are monsters everywhere, from the big screen to our mobile devices. It seems we can't escape the subject of our fascination. Stories about monsters and the people they frighten are just as popular as ever. And of course, pop culture is filled with all manner of examples, from demonic spirits and friendly ghosts to wolfmen and zombies. Literature and film have all the ammunition they need to show us the darker side of the world. But of all the various characters filling the page and stage, no figure has captured the imagination of more generations than one: the vampire. They've been portrayed as debonair and sensual, and as terrifying and brutal. Honestly, no matter how they're presented to us, we still gravitate toward their stories. Perhaps it's the idea of immortality, or the intimate way they kill their victims.
I want to be a vampire.
Whatever the draw, we can't seem to
be immortal.
Hollywood has shown us that vampires can be a lot of things to a lot of people. And with each passing year, more and more branches are grafted onto that ancient tree.
More C4, let's go, baby!
With deep and twisted roots. If we go back far enough, though, we can find all sorts of stories about evil people who thirsted for blood, causing their neighbors to question the inevitability of death. And those legends never lose their bite, no matter how old they are. But the stories from the past suggest that something darker is lurking in the shadows. And if you're ready, I'd like to take you on a hunt. I'm Aaron Mahnke, and this is Lore Legends. For centuries in Europe, a town's infrastructure was tied to the local church and its burial ground. Homes and businesses would be built around them, putting them at the center of the community. But as urbanization took hold in the 11th century, those simple town graveyards quickly became too small. More and more people were moving in and working close by, and of course, dying. And the influx of new bodies eventually became a major
Did you not pick a place to put the crate?
Once misunderstood for a very long time.
Chinook, you're taking way too long.
Heavy rain to churn up freshly buried corpses, or a wild dog might dig up someone's deceased mother. Grave robbers with shovels and a bottle of liquid courage in hand.
Oh, it looked like it dropped a crate at dome.
But not every body was a rotting mess inside a pine box. Some look surprisingly plump.
It's probably going satellite dish.
Than they were when they were still alive. Back then, there was no medical or scientific explanation.
Yeah, it's going satellite dish.
Remains. Locals believed that they looked like that because they had been buried.
Okay, I want to know. Can you take down
These bodies were restless, they said, rising from the grave to stalk the living at night. They were called revenant, from the French revenir, meaning to come back. In Slavic, they had two names. One was upir, but the other became more familiar over time. And it's how we today refer to creatures that don't quite know how to stay dead. Vampire. Some say that one of the oldest European stories related specifically to vampires is the legend of Count Estruc, whose origins can be found in Catalonian mythology. According to a prominent version of the story, it all started in the 12th century as Muslim kingdoms had taken over southern Spain. King Alfonso II worried that pagans in a particular region would side with the Muslims, who he had decided were his enemies. So he had to bring Christianity to the area, and he sent in a war hero to handle things there, a guy named Count Estruc. But the Count didn't convince everyone to convert to his new religion through love. After setting up shop in a castle in the town of Lares, he got to work convincing everyone by any means necessary. Torture, brutality, and, if necessary, murder. For years, Estruc's tyranny reigned supreme, until he finally was assassinated by his own soldiers in 1173. It was rumored that one of his captains, a man named Benac, had poisoned both the Count and his daughter Nuria, all because she had denied Benac's romantic advances. Other legends claim that he fought for the Spanish crown at the Battle of Las Navas de Tolosa. But one of the most prevailing stories is that Estruc specifically targeted witches. According to that legend, one of the victims he burned at the stake cursed him before she died. He actually got so sick the day after her execution that he was bedridden, until he finally passed away a short time later. And when it came time to collect his body for burial, it was missing. Pretty soon after that, strange things started to happen around town. Dead livestock began appearing around the castle where the Count had lived, animals that had been butchered and drained of their blood. It wasn't long before his servants caught sight of the culprit leaving those grotesque calling cards around the castle. It was Estruc himself. He'd been spotted walking the halls of the fortress, looking much younger than he had at the time of his death, and it seemed that his diet wasn't limited to cow's blood either. Stories began to spread among the locals, as stories do. They said that he would drink the blood of villagers and kidnap women before sending them back pregnant. And when those women gave birth months later, the child would never be a bouncing baby boy or girl. They were simply described as monsters, unnatural creatures that only lived for a short while. Now, depending on the version of the story you read, Count Estruc's reign of terror eventually came to an end thanks to the work of either a Jewish hermit or an elderly nun. In all of the versions, the hero tracks down the location of the vampire's coffin and drives a wooden stake through his heart. Today, there's not a lot of physical evidence that the people and places in these stories ever existed.
What the fuck?
It doesn't help that the castle in Lares was destroyed during
just kidnapping them and just making it mating with them? Damn.
If any of the legend is true. But the impact of the story is undeniable. Count Estruc may have been one of the first European vampires, but he certainly wasn't the last.
If I was a vampire, I would never do such a thing like that. What the fuck?
Throughout Europe, with a focus on Romania. Far, then it crossed the Atlantic, bringing a dangerous legend a little too close to home. It takes one to make one. That's one of the most common elements of vampire folklore, right? That anytime they wish, they could create more of themselves, just by swapping a bit of cursed blood. One of the most popular examples of this aspect of vampire folklore is, of course, Interview with a Vampire, the 1976 novel by Anne Rice. In it, we are told the story of a Louisiana plantation owner who is transformed by a vampire named Lestat. And of course, it makes sense that Rice would begin her novel in Louisiana, given the region's treasure trove of darker lore, stories that seem to shun the light. Now, the French first arrived in that area in a failed attempt to colonize it. It would take years for their efforts to finally yield fruit, allowing France to establish 3 major settlements along the coast: Mobile, Biloxi, and finally
it's gonna do train yard watch.
Several years later, during the first quarter of the 18th century, France found itself in something of a crisis. It had lost a huge amount of money fighting the War of Spanish Secession. Soldiers and rural farmers were out of work, and they flooded the streets of Paris. They were destitute, homeless, and considered by the monarchy to be a burden.
know what happened.
A lot of them were arrested for the sorts of crimes you might expect from desperate, hopeless people. But no matter how those deeds were classified, at the end of the day, they were simply arrested for being poor. Meanwhile, France's Louisiana territory was sparsely populated, and it hadn't produced much of anything. The hope was that the region could someday become a lucrative source of tobacco, just like their English neighbors to the east. But the war had used up almost all of France's resources. What they needed there were bodies, literally people to go and do the hard work. So France decided to solve 2 problems at once. It could remove its undesirables from the streets of Paris while also growing the colony's population overseas, all in one fell swoop, by shipping them from Europe to Louisiana. Of course, at first, most of these people were just men, and they were either convicts, military deserters, or smugglers. And that influx of men ended up creating another problem, because men alone couldn't populate the area. They needed, well, wives. These women were later referred to as filles à la cassette, or casket girls, an odd name that we'll explore a bit later. Now, the first ship carrying casket girls arrived as a merchant vessel named the Pelican in 1704. These women started in Mobile, where they were known as Pelican girls, but they eventually migrated to New Orleans. The next ship arrived 15 years later in Biloxi. But France was running into a problem, namely having enough of what they called women of virtue to send over the Atlantic to their colonies. So they repeated a formula that had worked the first time. They started sending women of ill repute. And folks, you are more than welcome to roll your eyes at all of these moral definitives. I know I am. Just be sure to consult your optometrist. I wouldn't want any of you to injure yourselves, right? Now, a large portion of the casket girls who were deported were convicts, many of whom had been arrested for sex work, although in quite a few cases, the charges had been false. Women were plucked from orphanages and poorhouses, too, all for the express purpose of becoming brides for the men already there. From 1719 to 1721, 5 ships delivered a total of 258 women from France to Louisiana. They had lived in squalor no matter where they were, be it prison, an orphanage, or a poorhouse, and were deemed by the government to be women without futures. It was possible that some of these women may have gone to North America willingly, given their minimal chance at success in France. At least in Louisiana, there was a possibility of marriage and children, but there are no records of such women. What we do have proof of, though, is that a number of families in France downright ordered French officials to deport their own imprisoned daughters to Louisiana, where their lives could be a little better. Of course, that is, if they survived the trip at all. In many cases, though, those lives did not improve. The men waiting for them were violent and often abused these young women and girls. And while most of those who were shipped to Louisiana did indeed end up getting married as intended, a number of them did not, and simply returned to the same types of work that they had performed in France to make ends meet. It's incredibly ironic, but many of the men of the colony were frustrated with, and maybe even suspicious of, the women that had been sent to them, at the very least because of their reputations. Why were they sent there? What was wrong with them in the first place? And when questions like those go unanswered for too long, people start inventing ways to fill in the blanks. And that is how legends are born. The legends have been around for a very long time. Since at least the 19th century, stories have circulated that some of these casket girls weren't just criminals and women of the night. They were literal monsters, sinking their teeth into the men of the colony. Some said the women arrived in North America malnourished, pale, and stricken with fever. What should have been a 3-month journey took closer to 5 months to complete. They stepped off the ships carrying small suitcases, or cassettes in French, filled with clothing, headdresses, and other accoutrements in order to make themselves more attractive to their potential husbands.
Thank you.
But the stories continued to spread. Visitors heard tales about the cassette girls in New Orleans, a word that eventually morphed into the similar sounding casquette, which sounds a lot like the English word casket. And so the...
Doing this one. I'm done with the casket girls. Nope. I'm done. What up? What the fuck just happened? Okay, that was weird. I think I just got butt dialed. The fuck? I got butt dialed. So all I could hear is this, one of my friend's mom just arguing with her. Something about like, being like rude or something. I couldn't really make it out because of her mother's voice was faint. I got butt dialed. Bro, I'm over here saying hello. Hello. And she's not even answering anything. It's very funny how like, what the fuck?
That's kind of funny that you just got butt.
I got butt dialed, but and me and her. And she's actually my she like goes to school with my stepbrother too, so like I know her by my stepbrother. But yeah, me and her just talked like throughout the whole summer. Like just got to know each other and all that. Okay. Alright, I gotta get rid of these. I gotta put away these clothes, bro. Like, I gotta learn how to do electricity. I wanna learn about farming and all that, but yeah. I know how to basically farm, but really not that much. Well, I'm just transferring all this loot from that I raided like 2 days ago or something. I think it was 2 days ago. I just forgot to transfer all the stuff because I got like either I was expanding my base or trying to work on the shooting floor. Why the hell? I was about to say killing floor. I meant shooting floor. I want to make a big old and tall tower, or I could just move up to a mountain or something. I don't know, or make my base like taller. Like I want to know the owner of the server, but so far I've not seen him on or any admins on. Did I kill that bear? Oh, I did kill him. He's just rolling down the hill. Oh shit, you can literally see that. Literally see that door through the wall. I don't need these boxes. Nor this. Now I just gotta get these. Oh, explosive. Like, it... Like, why should I... Like... I wanted to build a shop, but since no one comes on the server, I can't build a shop. Because I wouldn't get nothing out of it. Because no one would buy anything. Because there's nobody on the server to do it. Should pressure, I think. Bro, this guy has so many Tommies, like, goddamn. I got him. Oh. Ow. 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 Okay. Oh, I gotta put on my podcast.
When you use Bounce dryer sheets and your clothes look amazing, it's the sheets. Less static in your life? Yeah, it's the sheets. Smelling fresher than ever?
Well, that was
The
bitch.
sheets. Oh, so soft fabric? Ooh la la. It's the sheet. Less wrinkles on your clothes? You know it's the sheet. Bounce dryer sheets. More freshness,
What
more
the fuck?
softness. Less static,
Bro's over here
less
saying
wrinkles.
it's the sheet. Sheet.
Welcome to Lore Legends, a subset
S-H-E-E-T.
of even
What the?
by the history books.
That's
if
like
you're
he's
ready,
saying, it's
let's
the
begin.
shit. Okay, I thought
It was a very late infrastructure week. Back in 2018, the British Museum announced that it was
Mom
working with
Simulator, what the
State
fuck?
Antiquities and Heritage to preserve and protect
Oh, I'm
an
so
aging
gay.
public works project. Well, aging might not exactly. It's not just old. It's
What
the
the fuck,
oldest in the
Mom
world,
Simulator?
clocking in at a staggering
That's a game.
4,000 years. But while that one
It'd be funny
particular
if-
bridge
it would be
spent
funny if
millennia
it-
waiting to
if,
return to the light
they
of day,
added
you
a
and I
stepmom
probably
simulator.
see modern examples all the time. From massive landmarks
something.
like the Golden Gate Bridge,
Or
to
stepson
little
simulator,
country bridges
son
right in
simulator,
our
or whatever.
backyard. These construction projects often define who we are as humans. We are gap crossers.
But
For
goddamn,
thousands
why?
of years, we've
What the
endeavored to
fuck?
broaden our minds, expand our territory, and connect with disparate cultures. We hunger for connection, and bridges exist as a literal symbol of that quest. But that metaphor pops up in one other place: our discussions of life and death. Whether it's the rainbow bridge that some people dream of for their pets, or a desire to stay in touch with lost loved ones, we have always been looking for a way to reach beyond the veil. And if the legends are true, there are even some physical bridges out there that are rumored to do the impossible. They connect the land of the living to that of the dead. I'm Aaron Mankey, and this is Lore Legends.
Okay.
Tucked into the northwestern part of Vermont is the small town of Stowe. It sits at the foot of Mount Mansfield, the highest peak in the state, and is known as the American home of the Von Trapp family once they left Austria during World War II. It's also about an hour north of East Corinth, Vermont, one of the filming locations of Tim Burton's 1988 horror comedy, Beetlejuice. In fact, both
Beetlejuice!
towns have something in common: a small wooden bridge overlooking a babbling brook. But where the spooks and specters of the film were fictional, Stowe has its own haunted history, and Emily's Bridge
Mixing table.
sits at its center. Its official name is Goldbrook Covered Bridge, and it was built in 1844. It's a one-lane, 50-foot crossing that was constructed from sturdy pine. So sturdy, in fact, that its builder claimed that it would last forever. Today, the natural wood color has darkened to a muddled brown, but it's still standing.
Oh, wow.
There are 2 speed limit signs posted on the bridge, a 10-mile-per-hour limit for cars, while horses are restricted to a walking pace. But its robust construction and odd speed restrictions aren't why Goldbrook Covered Bridge is so well known. It has a much darker reputation, all because of one young girl, named Emily. There are several iterations of the tale, all of which end the same way, with Emily's spirit haunting the now namesake
Hey,
bridge.
Louise.
According to one version of the legend, Emily was a teenage girl living either in the 1920s
Hold up.
or mid-1800s. She was involved with
Let me
a man
organize
she loved
my
deeply,
stuff,
so
so-
much so that the two had planned on getting married. They agreed to meet one day at the covered bridge. Some say the wedding itself was set to occur right
My
there.
friend.
Well, unfortunately, Emily's parents didn't approve of her suitor. On the day they were scheduled to wed, Emily's lover didn't arrive at the bridge at the appointed hour. She was distraught, and in her anguish, she hanged herself there from the rafters. Another
Damn.
version of the story claims that Emily was a young bride waiting at the altar for a groom who never showed up at the church. In that story, Emily jumped into a carriage and sped away, possibly off to confront herself. But in her anger and sadness, she accidentally went careening into a rock-filled brook near the bridge. And in a third version of Emily's tragic
It's
tale,
podcast.
she's seen jumping off the side of the bridge. The only problem with that variation, though, is that the bridge isn't too far off the ground, so it was more likely that she jumped from a higher spot nearby. Of course, thanks to classic tales like Romeo and Juliet, stories of ill-fated lovers with disapproving parents often involve some kind of violence, and Emily's is no different. It's been suggested that she was killed on the bridge by her fiancé's mother to keep them from getting married. And others claim that she told her lover that she was pregnant and excited to have a child with him. But he did not take the news well, and she threatened to tell the whole town about it if he left her. To keep her quiet, they say he killed her and possibly left town. And I'll be honest, the narrative surrounding Emily's tragic wedding day changes so much with each retelling, it's hard to pin down one specific account. But don't come to Stowe thinking that you'll find a mountain of records on Emily and her family. According to the town's historical society, there is no known record of anyone named Emily taking her own life or dying on or near the bridge.
Wait,
And yet,
what?
There is one account from the 1920s of a little girl who sadly fell off the bridge and died when she hit her head on one of the boulders below. Was her name Emily? We don't know. We don't even know what Emily's full name was. Still, her ghost is said to appear to those who travel over the bridge, and she is anything but friendly in these stories. Apparently, she's quite angry and brandishes long nails that slash cars driving across the bridge. Scarier still is how she targets pedestrians, leaving long scratches down their backs. Even horses aren't spared from her supernatural anger issues. According to the local stories, you can also see Emily's ghostly figure hanging from the bridge's rafters, if that's the version of her story that you believe. Those who do have reported all of the classic anomalies on the bridge, including orbs in photographs, feelings of cold spots, and the malfunctioning of electronic equipment.
This is giving
And
me
those who want to
chills.
experience all of this for themselves are welcome to pay.
Oh my god!
Just be careful, though, because if you go there between midnight and 3 a.m., you might just encounter
I have so much
Emily's
guns
spirit.
and weapons. Holy crap! Bro, someone raised me and just seized my weaponry.
It's
Oh
the
my
bridge
god!
name. Just outside of Indianapolis, in the town of Avon, is a bridge that has existed there for over a century. Completed in 1907, this overpass arches above South County Road 625 East and White Lick Creek. Its cement and steel frame boasts 3 massive archways, measuring 75 feet apiece, which are then topped with 24 smaller arches, each about 7.5 feet tall. The bridge was designed by an engineer named W.M. Dunn and was built by the Savage Construction Company to carry trains traveling to and from Indianapolis's Union Station. Just a year after its completion, the bridge was double-tracked, meaning that instead of trains sharing one track and taking turns going in opposite directions, they can now travel simultaneously without delay. Sadly, though, by that time, several men had already lost their lives due to various accidents. Despite that, the bridge continued to grow in use and popularity. It's a well-known local landmark in Avon that's still in use today. It's even featured on the town's official seal.
Damn it.
Of course, those accidents didn't go unnoticed, though, and the men who died apparently won't let anyone forget them. The first claims of spectral sightings date all the way back to November of 1908. That's when one local newspaper reported the bridge as being haunted due to several deadly incidents that occurred there. According to the Plainfield Caller, sounds of a great weight falling into the water underneath are sometimes heard, but the water remains
I
perfectly
don't know
calm
the
with no
Oh,
sign
I
of
don't know.
having been disturbed. J.W. Bunk Atherton, one of our most well-known citizens, passed the bridge just after dark on election night, and he declares he saw some spirits hovering around the east end of the structure.
This is gonna be
On top of
where
that,
the
people have
explosives
allegedly
are
heard screaming and
located.
moaning coming from the vicinity of the bridge, and there are several local legends that
I
explain why. One
know
story claims that a
place
worker who was assisting with its
where
construction
the
was sawing a
grass is
wooden
really
beam when he
green
plummeted
at.
into a pool
Oh,
of
no.
wet concrete. The
One
foreman refused to
red
stop,
and
and the
black.
man was entombed within. They say that a
No, I think I'm
six-foot-long,
singing
two-man
Supernatural
crosscut saw
Mobs.
was reportedly left
I don't
behind
know.
in the concrete as well. Now, some say that it was part of an attempt by his co-workers to save his life, by extending him one end to grab onto. By that time, though, the concrete had already had a strong enough grip on his body. His colleagues could only watch as he was swallowed by the hardening liquid. In most retellings of this story, the worker was either black, Chinese,
Oh God.
and the foreman's racism or
Oh,
anti-immigrant
God.
sentiment was the reason why he made no attempt to save the man's life. Whether
Yeah,
or
this
not
is
this
gonna
is
be
true,
where comps
the worker's
are.
body is said to still be encased in the cement of the bridge. And on top of all of that, some
One.
people swear that if you look at the spot where he died, you can still see the outline of his face. It's also been rumored that he died with his arm poking out of the cement, and his fellow workers simply cut it off.
Oh.
Other possible explanations for the haunting activity at the bridge claim that 4 men fell to their death in the creek under the bridge during its construction. Not only have visitors reported hearing
I
those
can't see
screams, but
nothing.
also the thumps and splashes of their bodies hitting the water. But not all of the tragic tales surrounding the bridge involve workers. One legend claims that a woman
Okay, I
had
can
been
see.
hurrying across the tracks on foot while carrying her sick baby. She was on her way to a doctor, they say, when her foot got caught in the tracks, causing her to drop the child.
Oh
Other
no.
versions of that story also involve the mother tumbling and dying
Oh,
as well,
no.
losing her battle with grief and taking her own life later on. They say that if you listen closely, you may hear her ghostly screams as she cries out for her lost child. And finally, one more popular legend holds that a boy was late coming home from his girlfriend's house on foot. As he crossed the bridge, he saw a train's lights in the distance, its horns blaring at him to get out of the way. The boy instinctively jumped off the bridge, but quickly realized that he was too high off the ground and that he was going to die. The scream heard at night, preceded by a train whistle, is said to be his, just before his body hits the ground. I do have to say, though, that skeptics are quick to point out that what ghost hunters and the morbidly curious believe to be ghostly shrieks are actually just reverberations in the hollows of the bridge from trains passing overhead. Which does make sense, but true believers don't let acoustic science get in the way of a good scare, do they? They've reported everything from glowing blue-green lights at night to visible tears on the concrete in the summer. The town, though, doesn't seem fazed by the rumors. They've even placed an informative sign.
I swear to God, like, lore, bro,
complete with short
is
summaries
just,
of some of the most popular.
it's just
legends.
gruesome, just brutal.
Just what
It just
steps?
explains every single detail. Oh shit, no.
London Bridge is falling down. There aren't a lot of songs from our childhoods that are as memorable as that.
Ah, the good old London
Built by
Bridge
a guy
falling
named Peter
down.
of Colechurch between 1176 and 1209, the old London Bridge that we know from the nursery rhyme was constructed of stone. It had been built to replace a series
And there's
of
also
bridges
people
left
built
behind in
inside of the
London.
London Bridge.
But in 1799, a
Literally,
engineer named John Rennie
they're
dedicated on August 1st of
basically
1830.
all old
And the
bridges.
bridge held up quite
There's
well for the
people
next 70
inside of
years or
them.
so. But that is until they showed up. And by they, I'm talking about cars. To no one's surprise, the 1,000-foot-long Greenwich Bridge, built during the early 19th century, was no match for the automobile. As people began driving on it, the structure started sinking into the Thames at a rate of about an inch every
The
8 years.
London Bridge is
1924, one
falling
side of the
down,
bridge was actually 4 inches lower than the other. But it
falling
wasn't until the
down.
1960s when officials decided that it was time to replace
I need more
Of course,
crates.
hauling off the old bridge and building a new one would cost a pretty penny. And all that granite would wind up in a junkyard anyway. So one city councilor came up with another way. His name was Ivan Lukin, and his answer to their
Ivan.
problems was simple. Sell London Bridge to the United States. Lucan landed in America
Bro.
in 1968 with one mission: sell the historic landmark by any means necessary. He even held a press conference in New York where he announced, "London Bridge is not just a bridge, it is the heir of 2,000 years of history." Now, to be fair, most people found the bridge to be ugly and unimpressive, but one Arizona man saw its potential.
Is the
Robert
London
E.
Bridge
McCulloch Sr.
red?
had purchased
What?
26
No.
square miles of desert on the shores of Lake Havasu back in
Nursery rhyme.
1963. He apparently made his fortune selling motorboats and chainsaws. But according to him, the secret to his success
I have a
was
chainsaw.
actually, as he put it, booze and
Literally in my inventory, I have a chainsaw.
charming, right? He was already in the process of turning Lake Havasu City into a tourist destination, aided by his buddy Cornelius Vanderbilt Wood, the man who designed Disneyland. He had drawn a number of refugees from the freezing Midwest to his sunny desert oasis and believed that London Bridge would be just
Oh,
the thing
whoops.
to pull in
That's not
even
supposed
more.
to be in there.
On April 18th of 1968, McCulloch purchased London
The
Bridge for roughly
London
$2.5
Bridge
million,
is
more than
falling
$21 million
down,
today.
falling
But getting
down,
the bridge from London to Lake
falling
Havasu
down.
was a
The
miracle of modern
London
engineering.
Bridge is
It was
falling
dismantled,
down,
brick by brick,
my
with workers labeling
fair
each one with its specific
lady.
position. The bricks were then put into crates and loaded onto a cargo ship bound for Long Beach, California. A convoy
Long
of
Beach,
trucks picked up those crates
California!
and carted them all the way to Lake Havasu, where
Greenwich
a construction
Beach.
crew reassembled the bridge to its former glory.
London
$7 million,
Bridge is
and 3 years
falling
later,
down,
London Bridge officially
falling
reopened
down,
in its new desert
falling
home on
down.
October 10th
The
of
London
1971.
Bridge is-
12,000 people, more than the population of Lake Havasu City at the time, attended the lavish opening ceremony. But if the legends are true, they didn't just transport a crumbling British landmark overseas. They also brought some ghosts along for the
London
ride.
Bridge
In fact, the
is
first reports of a
falling
haunting at
down,
London Bridge came from a
falling
woman who
down,
attended the opening
falling
ceremony in
down.
1971.
London
According to her
Bridge
story,
is
she witnessed a group of poor
falling
people wearing
down,
old period
my
clothing
fair
walking nearby.
lady.
She initially thought that they were part of the event, hired to provide period-specific ambiance to the festivities. But as soon as others got a look at them too, the quartet disappeared. Others have allegedly witnessed a man wearing a top hat and cape, believing the figure to be none other than the ghost of Jack the Ripper himself. But the most frequently witnessed apparition is
That
of a
sounds
woman in
like a
black
killer,
dress,
a
who's
murderer,
hurrying
a
across the
serial
bridge,
killer.
clutching her purse in her hands. People claim to have seen her leap off the bridge into the water.
Whee!
Causes a
Splat.
splash. Instead, she vanishes before she ever reaches the bottom. And it's a really interesting thing to ponder, isn't it? A lot of paranormal experts believe that ghosts are tied to the physical
I'm a
locations where
dick.
they died, while others claim that ghosts can haunt any place that was important to them in life. Perhaps a few old London souls,
Oh, I remember that too. Very well.
unable to move on, despite the bridge itself doing a lot of moving. But at least they've got the sun on their backs and some sand beneath their feet. Honestly, there are worse places to hunt
Yay!
than Lake Havasu. Digging anywhere is rarely a simple task, even more so
That
when
sounds
digging
like
takes
creepy
place
music
in a
right
city
there
as
to
ancient
me.
as London. For example, back in 2007, the current London Bridge was undergoing
The
some updates,
London
with
Bridge
builders
is
excavating
falling
under it for a
down,
tourist attraction called the
falling
London
down.
Bridge Experience.
Ah!
That's when they uncovered something horrifying: a mass grave. The remains found within it were dated to the 1600s, and it was believed that the area had once been used as a plague pit during the time of the Black Death. Although there were
The Black
also
Death.
several skulls with holes bored into them, hinting that those were executed criminals. Now, of course, you know, plague
Executed.
pits were a common solution to the
Execute.
problem of mass
Order.
death back in the day,
Shit.
when as many as 1/5 of London's population succumbed to the illness. But efficiency always comes at a cost, and it's believed by some that this lack
Why
of
did I make
efficiency
space in
led
my
to some
inventory?
useless
Why?
spirits.
Oh, right.
According to a story from the BBC, workers who were helping out to build that exhibit reported that light bulbs mysteriously
KKK.
went out. At least a dozen in a single week in one instance. And tools disappeared as well, ranging from hammers and screwdrivers to an entire power drill. A number of the contractors even threatened to quit, so frightening were the experiences. One of the men in charge of the project claimed, and I quote, "Even the
Well, car
toughest
goes out.
lives are
I'm not gonna
continuing to
get
be
that
found
because
in the
I don't know how long it was
catacombs
out.
now, and I've noticed that they're tending to be moving around the site in pairs. I can't blame them, really. There is a strange feel about the place." And that sensation continues to this day. The London Bridge Experience even boasts an award, naming it one of the UK's scariest attractions, a reputation that's helped along by the costumed tour guides who play various historical characters, spanning the full 2,000 years of the location's history. And honestly, it's easy to believe that the site is haunted, although there is a slight complication. Those catacombs predate the current London Bridge, which means if there are restless spirits connected to those remains, they might have been exported to America along with the old bridge. Or maybe it doesn't matter. Perhaps the bigger lesson here is
a
also
whole lot of guns, 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 whole lot of guns.
Bridges have always been fascinating structures, both for their purpose and as convenient metaphor. So I hope you enjoyed our tour today through a handful of history's most haunted examples. But we're not done quite yet. I've got one more spooky bridge legend to share with you. Stick around through this brief sponsor break to hear all about it. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. For a lot of
whole lot of guns, whole lot of guns, whole lot of guns.
Some people swap gift cards, while others participate in gift exchange parties that leave a little mystery on the table. And others love seeking out that one special gift. Whether or not your family gives gifts during the holidays, you get to define how you give to yourself. And the holidays are a great time to do that. So whether it's by starting therapy, going easier on yourself through the tough moments,
I'll be back. Okay, I'm back.
Fracture, a determined young woman confronts the terrible actions
I was on a
to
phone
survive this
call, so
horrifying and mysterious new enemy. A unique horror film set in the Stone Age, out of darkness.
yeah, I'm almost done
digs into
organizing.
the violent and
I'm
monstrous
organizing
roots of
the
our
loot.
past,
I'm almost
according
done.
to Dread Central. Sight and Sound calls it a brutal, horrifying entry in the canon of history on screen. See,
how
out of
many hours you playing was?
I have. Hold up, that's not right. That's not the right hours. Hold up. I have 84 hours on Rust.
Why you ask?
Can I go back into Rust, please? Going on. I'll be back.
Okay.
Word. Unplug my PlayStation. Damn. Oh fuck, that's HDMI.